Welcome back to Boyd Book Club. Wrapping up our first semester of studying Boyd, his work, the ideas that influenced him, and the ideas that have continued to emerge in science, in philosophy, psychology, and how we can apply them in our use of Boyd's work. As we get to that point, we want to take a minute and tackle probably the most popular book on Boyd, and that is Robert Coram's Boyd, the Fighter Pilot Who Changed the Art of War. The Coram book can be looked at in sort of three ways, I think. First, as history, second, as histyography, and thirdly, as partially apocryphal. So let's take a second and break these down so that we can understand what those ideas mean and how they affect our reading of Boyd. First off, as history. The Coram biography provides us with a good deal of information about Boyd's life, his thinking, and his evolution, really, into a strategic thinker, planner, and philosopher of human thinking. So in that way, the Coram book knits together a lot of information for us and paints a very broad picture of Boyd the man. There is no doubt that you read this book with an understanding that Coram has a true love for Boyd as his subject. He appreciates him. He wants him to do well. And you can read that through the text. That's perfectly fine, because Coram does a reasonable job of balancing out that bit of idolatry, for lack of a better term, with pointing out where Boyd's stories may in fact have been apocryphal. He points out in particular with stories like the burning down of the barracks and some of the other unsubstantiated stories that Boyd claims as his own, where they may be apocryphal, they may not be exactly the truth, but never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And those stories, whether they are historically factual or not, contain nuggets of truth about Boyd, how he viewed himself and how others viewed him, that still paint a picture of the man's sort of psychology and philosophy that's useful for us. Coram also highlights areas where Boyd is not an exemplar that we would want to look up to, and perhaps his dealings with his family are the most prominent example of that. My goal is not to be critical or indicting of Boyd about anything in this case, merely to point out where I believe Coram does a reasonable job of trying to offer us a balanced view of Boyd, or at least a reasonably balanced view. Ultimately, this is a pro-Boyd book. And this brings us to the second point I want to focus on, that of histyography. Histyography is the study of how we create history, and not how we create history in the sense of how events unfold that have historical importance, but rather how we write and document what will enter the historical lexicon. And we need to read the Coram book with the eye not only of it being a biography and a history, but with the eye of the histyographer. And I say this because ultimately I think Boyd would want us to read the book that way. Boyd is always asking the question and prompting us to ask the question, how does my orientation shape my observation? And how do my observations shape my orientation? That question of shaping and being shaped by your observations is at the heart of what histyography is all about. It is asking the questions about why particular elements of history have been documented and why they have been documented the way they have. As critical thinkers, not only of Boyd's works, but in general, as individuals trying to apply Boyd's work, we want to ask that question of everything that comes in front of us. When the idea comes up of question everything, and this is something that I'm a big believer in, it's not that we should be doubtful of the intentions of particular authors or creators of various media. What it means is that we should always be asking, what's missing? What was the lens that this person was viewing the subject through? Because there is no pure objectivity. The OODA loop shows us that none of us are capable of a wholly dispassionate, omnipotent, omniscient view of the world. None of us is capable of being that third-person narrator. With that in mind, we should be aware of it and think about that as we read Boyd's work, as we read the Coram text, as we explore all of these topics. This author, this creator, me included, are sitting down to ultimately sell you on something. It may be a financial sell, right? I may be sitting here trying to sell you insurance. I'm not interested in selling insurance. However, we're all trying to sell you something. We are trying to convince you, implore you to look at the world in a certain way, even if we're not asking you to reject all your other belief systems or what you've known before. We are asking you we are trying to sell you our viewpoint. You should always be asking, where is Chris coming from with this? What's Chris trying to do? So we should read the Coram book with this understanding of histyography and this understanding that Coram has his own message to sell. And that message is ultimately a pro-Boyd sell. We should all be sympathetic to that. We're interested in Boyd as a creator, as a thinker. And with that in mind, we should be open to Coram's generally pro-Boyd approach while acknowledging both the apocryphal nature of some of the stories as well as some of the more negative aspects of Boyd's personality and his character that Coram brings to light. Those are valid points that need to be considered in our understanding of the man as a whole. Where histyography can also be helpful, though, is that if we read history with the eye of the histyographer, we don't necessarily have to apply a judgment to all of these things. We don't necessarily have to try to find on balance, Boyd, thumbs up or neutral or thumbs down. We're not a Roman emperor at the gladiatorial games. We can simply take the information on board. We can allow it to fill our orientation and in turn shape our understanding. We don't have to make a moral judgment about Boyd. We didn't live with him. We can use him as an example, both good and bad, of how to navigate situations and environments. In the same way we should be trying to do with everybody we come in contact with. Where Coram's text is most useful in my mind is providing us with the backstory of Boyd's development as a thinker and his process. We see in very intricate detail where the aerial attack study comes from, where patterns of conflict comes from, how we ultimately get to the essence of winning and losing and the OODA loop graphic. We see Boyd's process and the development of his thinking as much as we can see anyone's process of thinking. Through the stories that Coram relates to us, we are able to get an insight into the shifts in Boyd's thinking, those paradigm shifts, those structural changes that occurred as he reached illuminating moments. And for me, where that's useful is it allows us to understand how someone can do what I call seize serendipity. Ultimately, Seizing Serendipity is a book that I started to write several years ago, and maybe through this process I'm going to end up coming back to. Where I see it is this. The critical thinker, the adept in using OODA loop thinking is principally adapt at two things. First, the OODA loop thinker is capable of spotting novelty. And novelty is an indication that we are up against an uncertainty or an unfamiliarity, and it should trigger its own set of OODA loop thinking. Many people are destabilized by novelty. They are driven to the side by novelty. They are derailed by novelty. The thinker versed in Boyd's discourse in winning and losing, it recognizes the importance of novelty. The other element that Coram highlights is the capacity that Boyd showed to understand through analogy. Analogy is recognizing the comparison between things and using what we know, in this particular moment, our a priori knowledge, our previous experiences, to come forth and understand, to both destroy and synthesize new understanding of this novel situation. One of the things that we as human beings are doing in our earliest years is amassing an initial set of information. And that initial set of information is a very slow process because we don't have analogs to compare it to. As a result, all information must be learned through an explicit process with no comparisons. Even what most people label as implicit learning, non-intentional, non-directed learning, let's say, is in fact explicit learning for the infant, the toddler, the preschool-age child. What do I mean by this? When you sit down to teach your child the alphabet, that is your explicit attempt to teach. What you show your child in how you react to your spouse, how you react to your friends, how you interact with people in the world, that is implicit teaching. It is teaching that you are not doing intentionally. You are not setting aside time to say, we are now learning, in the same way that you do with the explicit teaching of the ABCs. However, for the toddler, for the preschool-age child, the learning process is still an explicit one. They are actively engaged in trying to understand the world around them and are taking in this information, trying to process it, trying to categorize it. As they get older, they are able to draw upon that reservoir of knowledge that you have imparted, and by analogy, by comparison, learn new information. One of the things that Coram highlights for us throughout The Fighter Pilot Who Changed the Art of War, both explicitly and tacitly, is the importance of novelty and reasoning by analogy. All we need to do to see the importance that Boyd places on analogy is to look at how he begins to apply what sort of becomes his holy trinity of incompleteness, uncertainty, and the second law of thermodynamics. None of those concepts came to him as explicit information about either how to fly a fighter plane or decision making. Rather, he saw a novel concept that interested him, and through analogy found a way to connect it to what he was already working on. Now, what's important was that he didn't simply stop with his heuristic understanding, his tacit understanding of these concepts. He continued to explore them and refine his understanding. So he didn't stop with the analogy. He sought to dig deeper and deeper into the work. So as we bring semester one of Boyd Book Club to a close, We have focused on Franz Ozinga's Science, Strategy, and War. We have looked at Boyd, the Fighter Pilot Who Changed the Art of War by Robert Coram, and we have read through Boyd's Destruction and Creation paper. These three texts, I think, form a wonderful starting point in beginning to dissect Boyd as a thinker, Boyd's thinking, and applying Boyd's thinking in the rest of our own lives and our own study of decision-making concepts. As always, thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend it with me, thinking about ideas of importance and interest to all of us. I look forward to you joining me in semester 2 as we continue this work. Please use the comment sections in Patreon or YouTube to offer comments about this work so that we can have a broader discussion as a community about it. I'll see you soon. Cheers.